The deafening screech of tires tore through the quiet evening, followed by a bone-chilling crash. I froze mid-step, my breath caught in my throat as I turned to see the chaos unfolding just a block away. A sleek black sports car, a car I didn't recognize but somehow knew would wreck my life, had slammed into a truck. The front end crumpled like paper, the windshield shattered, and smoke billowed into the night air. My heart pounded in my chest, the kind of pounding you can't ignore, the kind that warns you something is about to change forever. But it wasn't just the crash. It was what, or rather, who I saw being pulled from the wreckage. Emily, my wife. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near here. 2 hours ago, she had kissed me goodbye, claiming she was heading out to celebrate her best friend Sarah's birthday. I remember her walking out the door, her red dress hugging her curves a little too perfectly for a casual dinner. She said she wouldn't be late, that it was just the girls. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the way she avoided my eyes as she left had my instincts buzzing. And now, here she was pulled from the passenger seat of a car I didn't recognize. But it wasn't just the car. It wasn't even just her. It was the man. He was unconscious, slumped against the airbag in the driver's seat. I didn't know his name, but I knew his face. Someone I'd seen her texting more than once. Someone she always claimed was just a friend. The kind of friend you don't mention too often, the kind whose texts make you laugh just a little too hard. As the paramedics loaded them both into ambulances, my phone buzzed. A message. At first, I thought it was from Emily, maybe letting me know she was hurt, explaining why she was here. But when I saw the number, it wasn't hers. And when I read the text, my stomach dropped. This is probably my last message. I'm in the hospital, and your husband is here. My blood ran cold. What did this even mean? My hands shook as I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. The message had to be from the man. But why would he send it to me? Why now? In the middle of an accident. I barely noticed the police officer approaching me until he was standing right in front of me, clipboard in hand. Do you know the individuals involved in the crash? He asked. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. Did I? Did I really know her? Did I know anything about her anymore? Yes, I finally said, my voice hoarse. She's my wife. The officer nodded and gave me a pitying look I didn't want. They're being taken to Mercy Hospital. You might want to head over there. I nodded, numbly, my legs already moving toward my car. My head was spinning, my thoughts a storm of anger, betrayal, and confusion. By the time I reached the hospital, I wasn't sure if I wanted answers or if I wanted to explode. I walked into the ER, the fluorescent lights blinding and the sterile smell making my stomach churn. I gave Emily's name to the nurse at the front desk, and she directed me to the waiting area. My heart pounded as I sat there, every second feeling like an eternity. And then I saw her. She was wheeled out of the trauma room, looking a little shaken but otherwise fine. Her makeup was still flawless, her hair only slightly tousled, as if she'd just stepped off a chaotic movie set instead of being in a near-fatal crash. Tyler, she said, her voice rising in shock. She looked at me like I was the one who didn't belong here. What the hell is going on, Emily? I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. I didn't care. I wasn't about to play the fool any longer. She hesitated for half a second, her eyes darting toward the hallway where they'd wheeled the other man. And that's when I saw it. That flicker of guilt. The kind of guilt you can't fake. I can explain, she stammered, her usual confident tone faltering. I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides. Then explain, I spat. Explain why you were in that car. Explain why you lied about where you were going tonight. And explain who the hell sent me this text. I shoved my phone in her face, the message still glowing on the screen. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw fear. Real, genuine fear. But instead of answering, she did what she always did. She deflected. This isn't the time or place, Tyler, she said, her voice low, almost pleading. Can we talk about this later? Please. But I wasn't going to let her off that easy. Not this time. Later, I said, my voice rising. You think there's going to be a later after this? Her silence spoke louder than any excuse she could have given. And in that silence, I realized something. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built my life with, was nothing more than a stranger. A liar. A cheat. The hospital hallway felt endless as I paced back and forth, replaying the crash and the text message over and over in my mind. My thoughts churned, each one darker than the last. Emily was in a private room now, and the man, her friend, was being treated down the hall. My fists clenched at the thought of him. I didn't even know his name, but I knew enough. He was the reason my wife was sneaking around, lying to my face, and now sitting in a hospital bed trying to figure out how to wriggle out of the mess she created. The nurse finally told me I could go in and see her. I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. Emily was sitting up in bed, looking a little too composed for someone who had just survived a car crash. Her hands were folded neatly on her lap, and when she looked up and saw me, her expression shifted from relief to irritation. "You shouldn't have come here, Tyler," she said flatly. Her tone hit me like a slap. Not gratitude for rushing to see if she was okay. Not an ounce of concern for what I might be feeling. Just irritation, as if I was an inconvenience. "Shouldn't have come?" I repeated, my voice low but sharp. "You're in the hospital after being in a car with some guy, and I shouldn't have come? Are you kidding me, Emily?" She sighed, leaning back against the pillows like she was already exhausted by the conversation. "I don't know what you want me to say." "Oh, I don't know," I snapped, stepping closer. "Maybe start with the truth? Who was he, Emily? Why were you in his car? And why did I get a message saying my husband is here?" Her face hardened, and for a moment, I thought she was going to lash out. But instead, she looked away, her gaze fixed on the window. "You're overreacting," she said quietly. "It's not what you think." My laugh was bitter sharp. "Not what I think." "Then tell me, Emily, because right now I think you've been lying to me for months. I think you've been sneaking around with some guy and feeding me garbage about girls' nights and yoga classes. So if it's not what I think, enlighten me." Her silence was deafening. She bit her lip, a telltale sign that she was trying to come up with an excuse. But I wasn't giving her the time. "I saw the way you grabbed his hand," I said, my voice rising. "The way you looked at him when they pulled you out of that car. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending he's just a friend." Her head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp now. "You want the truth? Yes, I was with him. Yes, we've been seeing each other. Happy now?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Even though I'd suspected it, hearing her say it out loud felt like a knife twisting in my chest. My breath caught, my hands trembling at my sides. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What does it matter?" she shot back. "It matters to me," I roared, my anger finally spilling over. "How long have you been making me look like a fool, Emily? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" She rolled her eyes, the audacity of her arrogance leaving me speechless. "Does it really make a difference? A few months, maybe more. It's not like you were paying attention anyway." Her words stung, each one like a slap to the face. "Not paying attention?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Are you seriously blaming me for this? For your lies? For your cheating?" She shrugged, her indifference infuriating. "It's not like things have been great between us, Tyler. Maybe if you'd been more exciting, I wouldn't have needed to find someone who actually makes me feel alive." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I had loved, trusted, built a life with, was standing in front of me, not only admitting to her betrayal, but blaming me for it. "Unbelievable," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "You're unbelievable, Emily. I've been working my ass off to give us a good life, and this is how you repay me? By throwing everything we've built away for what? Some thrill? Some excitement?" She didn't respond, her expression unreadable. I felt my anger boiling over, threatening to consume me. But beneath the rage was a crushing sadness, a weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I took a step back, trying to regain some semblance of control. "You know what? Don't bother explaining. I've heard enough. I hope he was worth it, Emily. I really do." Before she could say anything else, I turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. I didn't know where to go or what to do next, but one thing was clear. This was far from over. As I stormed down the hallway, I passed the room where they had taken him, the man who had wrecked my marriage. I stopped, staring at the closed door, my fists clenched. Part of me wanted to go in, to confront him, to demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't change anything. Instead, I walked out of the hospital, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I stood there for a moment, staring at the stars, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. And then my phone buzzed again. Another message. We need to talk. It's not just about us. There's something else you need to know. My blood ran cold. Whatever this was, it wasn't over yet. The chill of the night air bit into my skin as I stood frozen, staring at my phone. The message was from the same unknown number that had tipped me off earlier. My mind was racing. We need to talk. It's not just about us. There's something else you need to know. What else could there possibly be? My wife had already admitted to cheating. Wasn't that betrayal enough? My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Instead, I paced the parking lot, the sharp crunch of gravel under my shoes echoing in the stillness. I wanted answers, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear them. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss of truths I wasn't prepared for. Minutes passed before I took a deep breath and called the number. It rang twice before a strained, almost panicked voice answered. "Tyler," the man said. Hearing him speak, my name ignited a fire in my chest. I gritted my teeth, my hand tightening around the phone. "Yeah, it's me," I spat. "Who the hell are you? And why do you think you can just text me?" There was a pause, and I could hear him exhale shakily on the other end. "Look, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but we need to talk. This isn't just about Emily and me. There's something bigger going on, and you deserve to know." "Bigger?" I snapped. "You're sleeping with my wife, and now you're telling me there's something bigger? What could possibly make this worse?" "Not over the phone," he said quickly. "Meet me. Please. Just give me a chance to explain." The audacity of this man was astounding. He'd blown up my life, and now he wanted me to meet him? Every instinct in my body told me to hang up, but the nagging curiosity in the back of my mind wouldn't let me. If there was more to the story, I needed to know. "Fine," I said through clenched teeth. "Where?" "There's a diner near the hospital," he said, relief evident in his voice. "The 24-hour one. Meet me there in half an hour." "Half an hour," I echoed, then hung up without another word. I drove to the diner in silence, the glow of the dashboard lights illuminating my clenched fists on the steering wheel. My mind replayed every interaction with Emily over the past few months, every lie she'd told, every excuse she'd made. How had I not seen this coming? The diner was nearly empty when I arrived, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. I spotted him immediately, sitting in a booth near the back, his head down, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. He looked up as I approached, his face pale and drawn. "Tyler," he said, standing awkwardly as I reached the table. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, taking in the man who had turned my life upside down. He was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, with a sharp jawline and a cocky air that made me want to punch him on sight. "Sit down," he said, motioning to the booth across from him. I hesitated before sliding into the seat, my arms crossed over my chest. "Start talking," I said coldly. "You've got 5 minutes." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "My name's Jason," he began. "And yeah, I've been seeing Emily. I'm not going to lie to you about that." "Damn right you won't," I snapped. "But this isn't just about us," he continued quickly, his eyes darting nervously around the diner. "Emily's been hiding something from both of us." I raised an eyebrow, my patience wearing thin. "Hiding what?" He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "She's been taking money from you. From me. From other people." I froze, his words hitting me like a freight train. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jason reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of papers, sliding them across the table. I picked them up, my hands shaking as I flipped through them. Bank statements, transactions, withdrawals, thousands of dollars gone, money I had earned, saved, and trusted her with. "She told me she was in debt," Jason said quietly, "that she needed help getting back on her feet. I gave her everything I could, but then I started noticing things didn't add up. She always had new clothes, expensive bags, jewelry, things she shouldn't have been able to afford, even with my help." My blood boiled as I stared at the evidence in front of me. "She's been stealing from me," I muttered, more to myself than to him. Jason nodded grimly. And not just you. She's been playing multiple guys, Tyler. You're not the only one she's been lying to. The room spun as his words sank in. This wasn't just an affair. This was a con, a web of lies and deceit that went far deeper than I had imagined. I looked up at Jason, my anger simmering just below the surface. Why are you telling me this? Because I didn't know, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't know she was married. I didn't know she was using me, just like she's been using you. And now, I want her to pay for what she's done. I leaned back in the booth, my mind racing. Emily wasn't just a cheater. She was a thief, a manipulator, a predator. And now, she had two men, two victims ready to take her down. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of control returning. Emily had thought she could play me, but now the tables were turning. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stared at Jason, his words sinking in like daggers. Emily wasn't just a liar or a cheater. She was a calculated predator. The money she had taken from me, from him, and God knows how many others, painted a picture far worse than I had imagined. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had financially gutted me, all while wearing that smug, unbothered mask she perfected. I pushed the stack of papers back toward him and leaned in, my voice low and laced with venom. You're telling me she's been running this little con for months, maybe longer? And you've just been sitting on this information until now. Jason stiffened, clearly not prepared for my tone. I didn't know at first. She's good at what she does, Tyler. She plays the role perfectly, sweet, vulnerable, like she just needs a little help. It wasn't until a few weeks ago that I started piecing it together. Tonight's crash just sped things up. Speeds things up? I repeated, my anger boiling just beneath the surface. You mean you were fine letting her screw me over as long as you were getting what you wanted from her? His face darkened, and for a moment it looked like he wanted to fight back. But then he sighed and shook his head. You're right. I was selfish. I thought she loved me. I thought I was different. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Turns out, I'm just another idiot she played. I leaned back in the booth, my mind spinning. Every piece of evidence pointed to Emily being a cold, calculating liar. And yet, part of me didn't want to believe it. How could I have been so blind for so long? So what now? Jason asked, his voice breaking into my thoughts. Do we just let her get away with this? I looked up at him, my jaw tightening. No. Jason's eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and determination. Good, because I've got an idea, but it's going to take both of us. I crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes. I'm listening. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as he outlined his plan. It wasn't just about confronting Emily. It was about exposing her for who she truly was. Jason had connections, a friend who worked in private investigations. He proposed that we gather every piece of evidence we could, bank statements, text messages, even her location history, if we could get it. Then, we'd confront her together, in public, where she couldn't manipulate her way out of it. We're not just doing this for us, Jason said, his voice growing more confident. There could be more people she's scammed. If we can bring this to light, we might be able to stop her from doing this to anyone else. The idea had merit, but I wasn't sold yet. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Jason might have his own agenda. After all, he'd been complicit in this mess until he found himself burned. Still, the thought of finally putting Emily in her place, of taking back control, was intoxicating. And then what? I asked, my voice cold. What happens after we confront her? She runs off to her next victim, and we're left with nothing. Jason hesitated, clearly unsure of how to answer. I don't know, he admitted. But I can't sit back and let her win. Can you? His words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. Could I? Could I let her walk away and scathed after everything she'd done? The answer was a resounding no. Emily had taken my trust, my love, and now my money. She didn't deserve a clean getaway. Fine, I said finally. But we're doing this my way. No half-assed confrontations, no public scenes, unless we're absolutely ready. If we're taking her down, we're going all in. Jason nodded, relief washing over his face. Agreed. I'll call my friend tomorrow and get him started on gathering evidence. In the meantime, we need to act normal around her, no tipping her off. The thought of pretending everything was fine around Emily made my stomach churn, but I knew it was necessary. If she even suspected we were onto her, she'd disappear faster than I could blink. And I wasn't about to let her slip away. As I drove home that night, the weight of what was ahead pressed down on me. Jason and I might be unlikely allies, but we shared a common goal, making Emily pay for what she'd done. Still, the anger simmering beneath my surface was hard to contain. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to unleash every ounce of fury I felt and watch her crumble. But that wasn't the plan, and I had to stick to it. When I finally walked through the door of our house, Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Her red dress was neatly folded over the armrest, and she'd changed into one of her casual lounge sets, the kind she wore when she wanted to appear innocent and unassuming. "Hey," she said, looking up at me with that same disarming smile I'd fallen for years ago. "You okay? You seemed upset earlier." I stared at her, my jaw tightening as I forced myself to play along. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Just a long night." She nodded, her expression softening. "Well, I'm glad you're home. I was thinking we could order some takeout, maybe watch a movie." The audacity of her normalcy was staggering. Here she was sitting on our couch, acting like she hadn't just admitted to cheating on me, like she wasn't stealing from me. It took everything I had to nod and force a small smile. "Sure," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That sounds nice." But as I sat down beside her, every fiber of my being screamed that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. To be continued. Вы сказали. Продолжуй. Але кожна частина по 800 есельве. Чат сказал. Part 5. The silent war begins. Sitting next to Emily on the couch, pretending everything was normal, felt like trying to hold my breath underwater while the weight of everything crushed me. She scrolled through Netflix, her finger idly flicking through titles, while I sat stiffly, staring at the screen but seeing nothing. My mind was consumed with the plan Jason and I had devised. Collect evidence, gather strength, and finally take her down. But sitting there, watching her act like the perfect wife, made my blood boil. She looked so calm, so innocent, like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. The audacity of it made me want to grab the remote from her hand, toss it across the room, and scream, "Who do you think you're fooling?" But I didn't. "Not yet. Anything catching your eye?" she asked, glancing at me with that saccharine smile she used when she wanted to seem sweet. "Whatever you want," I said, keeping my tone even. "I trust your judgment." The words tasted bitter coming out of my mouth, but I forced them anyway. If she caught even a hint of my true feelings, the whole plan could fall apart. She settled on some romantic comedy, a genre she knew I wasn't particularly fond of. It was another subtle manipulation, something she'd done for years, always bending situations to her liking. Normally, I'd argue or roll my eyes, but tonight I let it slide. It wasn't worth the energy. I needed all my focus for the days ahead. As the movie played, I found myself studying her. The way her expression changed with the scenes, the way she laughed at all the right moments. It was as if she were auditioning for the role of a loving wife, trying to convince the world, and maybe even herself, that she wasn't the monster I now knew her to be. But I could see the cracks, the occasional darting glance at her phone, the slight tension in her shoulders when a text came through, and the way she quickly tilted the screen away from me before replying. It was subtle, but it was there. She was nervous, and that gave me hope. Maybe she wasn't as in control as she thought. When the movie ended, she stretched and let out a yawn, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I'm tired," she murmured. "I think I'm going to head to bed." For a moment, I froze, unsure how to respond. Normally, I'd kiss her goodnight, maybe even follow her upstairs. But tonight, the thought of touching her made my skin crawl. "Go ahead," I said, keeping my voice light. "I'll clean up here and join you in a bit." She hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to read my expression. But I kept my face neutral, giving her nothing to latch onto. After a moment, she nodded and stood, leaving me alone in the living room. The moment she was out of sight, I let out a shaky breath, my hands gripping the couch cushions as I tried to calm the storm inside me. I needed to focus, to channel my anger into something productive. I grabbed my phone and texted Jason. Me. She's acting like nothing happened. You sure we can pull this off? Jason, yes. I talked to my PI friend. He's starting tomorrow. We just need to get her phone records and financials. Meow. She's glued to her phone 24/7. Jason, we'll figure it out. Just keep playing the role for now. Playing the role. That was easier said than done. But I had no choice. If I confronted her too soon, she'd spin it back on me, make me the bad guy, and somehow come out the victim. She was good at that. Too good. The next day, I put on my best performance. I made breakfast, kissed her cheek as she left for her workout, and even sent her a text during the day telling her I missed her. Each action felt like swallowing glass, but it had to be done. She couldn't suspect a thing. In the meantime, Jason and his PI friend worked behind the scenes. They dug into her accounts, tracing the money she'd funneled out of ours into hers. They found emails, text messages, and even photos, proof of her deceit that left no room for doubt. But the real breakthrough came when Jason called me 2 days later. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice tense. "She's been planning a trip. With him." I nearly dropped my phone. "What? When?" "This weekend. She booked a hotel under a fake name, but my guy traced it back to her. She used your credit card, Tyler." The sheer audacity of her actions left me stunned. Not only was she cheating, but she was using my money to fund her escapades? Any lingering shred of doubt I'd had about her character evaporated in that moment. She wasn't just a liar. She was a parasite. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice cold. Jason hesitated. "We confront her there. Catch her in the act. I'll be there too. We'll have everything we need to blow this wide open." For a moment, I considered the chaos that would ensue. Emily would undoubtedly try to deny it, to twist the narrative in her favor. But with the evidence we had, there was no way she could wriggle out of this. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. "Let's do it," I said, my resolve hardening. "She's not getting away with this." That evening, I watched Emily pack a bag, claiming she was heading out of town for a wellness retreat with her friends. She kissed me goodbye at the door, her expression serene, as if she had no idea her world was about to implode. "Have fun," I said, forcing a smile. "You deserve it." As she drove away, I felt a strange mix of anger and anticipation. This was it, the beginning of the end. By the time the weekend was over, Emily's lies would come crashing down, and she'd have no one to blame but herself. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. Each passing hour was a test of my patience, but I knew I had to stay calm. Emily went about her routine like she had nothing to hide, her smug demeanor grating on my every nerve. But I played my part, acting like the oblivious husband she believed I was. Little did she know, her carefully constructed house of lies was about to collapse. Jason and I finalized the details over the next couple of days. The private investigator had gathered more than enough evidence. Screenshots of texts, email confirmations for hotel reservations, even pictures of Emily with Jason at various restaurants and bars. Every piece of evidence painted a damning picture of her betrayal. "She thinks she's untouchable," Jason said during our last call. "That's her weakness. She doesn't think we're smart enough to catch her. She's about to find out just how wrong she is," I replied, my voice cold. The plan was simple. We'd catch her red-handed at the hotel. Jason had booked a room at the same place under a different name, and the PI would be there to document everything. Once we confronted her, there'd be no way for her to talk her way out of it. Saturday morning arrived, and Emily was up early, humming to herself as she packed her things. She was in a disturbingly good mood, even throwing in a few extra smiles my way. I watched her silently, my stomach churning with a mix of anger and anticipation. "Don't wait up for me," she said with a wink as she slung her bag over her shoulder. "I'll probably be back late tomorrow night. These retreats can get pretty intense." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Take your time. Enjoy yourself." As she walked out the door, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the beginning of the end. I grabbed my phone and called Jason. "She just left," I said. "Perfect," he replied. "I'll meet you at the hotel in a couple of hours. She'll probably check in around noon." I drove to the hotel with a mix of dread and determination. Every mile brought me closer to the confrontation I'd been dreading and craving for days. When I pulled into the parking lot, Jason was already there, leaning against his car. "You ready for this?" he asked, his expression grim. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. The private investigator met us in the lobby, a no-nonsense woman named Claire who looked like she'd seen it all. She handed us a folder filled with printed copies of the evidence she'd collected. "This should be more than enough to confront her," Claire said. "But if she tries to deny it, I'll be here to back you up." We headed to the bar just off the lobby, a vantage point where we could see the front desk without being noticed. It wasn't long before Emily walked in, her red suitcase in tow. She was dressed to the nines, her hair perfectly styled, and her confidence practically radiating off her. Jason stiffened beside me as we watched her approach the check-in desk. The receptionist handed her a key card, and she flashed a dazzling smile before heading toward the elevators. "There she is," Jason muttered, smug as ever. "Let's give her a little time to settle in," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. We waited 30 minutes before heading up to her room. The hotel was eerily quiet, the soft hum of the elevators the only sound as we rode up to her floor. Jason and I exchanged a tense glance as the elevator dinged, the doors sliding open. Her room was at the end of the hall. My heart pounded with each step, the folder of evidence clutched tightly in my hand. When we reached her door, I took a deep breath and knocked. A moment later, the door opened, and there she was. Emily's eyes widened in shock as she took in the sight of me and Jason standing side by side. "Tyler," she stammered, her voice high-pitched and shaky. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I stepped inside, forcing her to back up into the room. Jason followed, shutting the door behind us. "You want to tell me what's going on, Emily?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. She blinked rapidly, her mind clearly racing as she tried to come up with an excuse. I don't know what you're talking about. This is just a retreat?" I interrupted, holding up the folder. "Save it. We know everything." Her eyes darted to the folder, panic flashing across her face. "What is that?" "Proof," Jason said, stepping forward. "Proof of your lies, your cheating, and your little scheme to rob us blind." Emily's expression hardened, her fear giving way to anger. "You've been spying on me?" she spat, her voice dripping with indignation. "That's pathetic, Tyler. Absolutely pathetic." "No," I said, my voice low and firm. "What's pathetic is what you've been doing behind my back. What's pathetic is lying to my face every day while you run around with him, and God knows who else." She crossed her arms, her lips curling into a sneer. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. So what? I made some mistakes. Everyone does." "Mistakes?" Jason barked, his face flushed with anger. "You've been conning us, Emily. Stealing from us. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Emily's eyes darted between us, her bravado starting to crack. "You don't have proof," she said, her voice faltering. I opened the folder and held up the bank statements, the texts, and the photos. "No proof? Then what do you call this?" For a moment, she said nothing, her face pale. Then, like the true manipulator she was, she straightened her shoulders and plastered on a defiant smile. "Fine," she said, her tone icy. "You caught me. Congratulations. Now what? You're going to cry about it? Call a lawyer? Go ahead. Do your worst." Her words lit a fire inside me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Emily's defiance was like gasoline on a fire, fueling the rage bubbling just beneath the surface. She stood there, arms crossed, glaring at me and Jason as if we were the ones in the wrong. The audacity of her attitude was staggering, but I wasn't about to let her get away with this. "Do my worst," I repeated, my voice low and cold. "Emily, you don't get to stand here and act like the victim. You lied, you cheated, and you stole from me. And not just me, from him too," I said, gesturing toward Jason. She rolled her eyes and scoffed. "Oh, please. You're both acting like you're saints. Newsflash, neither of you is perfect. So yeah, I took some money. So what? Maybe I deserved it after putting up with your boring, predictable routines for years." Jason clenched his fists at his sides, and I could see the restraint it took for him not to lash out. "You're unbelievable," he said through gritted teeth. "I gave you everything. I believed every lie you told me. And for what? So you could run around and treat me like I was disposable." Emily smirked, her arrogance seeping through every word. "You should have known better. Maybe if you'd paid attention, you would have seen the signs." The room was charged with tension, the air thick with unspoken anger and betrayal. I stepped forward, forcing Emily to back up slightly. Her confident facade wavered for a split second, and I seized the moment. "You think this is a game?" I said, my voice rising. "You think you can just waltz through life, using people, breaking trust, and there won't be consequences? Look around, Emily. This is your reckoning." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "And what exactly are you going to do, Tyler? Expose me? Call the cops? Good luck with that. You don't have the guts." Jason stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You want to test that theory? We have everything we need to take you down. Bank records, messages, photos, it's all here. And you know what? We've already spoken to my lawyer. You've committed fraud, Emily. This isn't just about your little affair. You've broken the law." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear cross her face. She opened her mouth to respond, but quickly closed it, her mind racing as she realized the gravity of the situation. She glanced at the folder in my hand, her bravado cracking as she processed the evidence stacked against her. "Fine," she said finally, her voice quieter but no less venomous. "What do you want? Money? An apology? Is that what this is about? You want me to grovel?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "An apology? You think saying sorry fixes this? You think throwing money at the problem erases what you've done? Emily, this isn't something you can buy your way out of." Jason nodded, his expression steely. "This is about accountability. You've been playing people for years, treating us like pawns in your little game. But the game's over." Emily's eyes darted between us, the reality of her situation sinking in. Her confidence was rapidly eroding, replaced by a desperate edge that made her seem smaller, weaker. For the first time, she looked vulnerable, but I wasn't falling for it. I knew better now. "You don't get to manipulate your way out of this," I said firmly. "Not this time." Her voice wavered as she tried to regain control. "So what? You're going to ruin me? Destroy my life? Is that what this is about? Revenge?" "No," I said, my tone icy. "This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. You don't get to walk away from this without consequences." Jason crossed his arms, glaring at her. "We've already started the process. My lawyer is preparing a case, and the PI has everything we need to prove what you've done. You can either come clean and face the consequences now, or we'll take this as far as it needs to go. Your choice." Emily's face twisted into a mix of anger and panic. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself, clearly realizing there was no way out. For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You can't ruin my life." I leaned in, my eyes locking with hers. "You did that to yourself, Emily." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stood frozen, her eyes darting between me and Jason, searching for some way to regain control. But there was nothing left for her to cling to. She was trapped, and she knew it. Finally, she sank onto the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. "What do you want from me?" she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "We want the truth," Jason said. "All of it. No more lies, no more excuses. And we want you to take responsibility for what you've done." Emily looked up at us, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. For a moment, it almost seemed like she might come clean, that she might finally take accountability for her actions. But then her expression hardened, and the walls went back up. "You want the truth?" she said bitterly. "Fine, I never loved either of you. You were just convenient, tools to get what I wanted. And you know what? I don't regret it. Not one bit." Her words hit like a gut punch, but instead of breaking me, they only strengthened my resolve. This was who she really was: cold, selfish, and unapologetic. And now, there was no doubt in my mind that I was doing the right thing. Jason took a step back, his jaw tightening. "You've made your choice," he said. "Now it's our turn." I nodded, my voice steady as I spoke. "We're done here, Emily. But this isn't the end. You'll be hearing from us soon." With that, we turned and walked out of the room, leaving Emily alone with the weight of her choices. The door clicked shut behind us, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now I knew where I stood. Jason and I walked down the hotel hallway in silence, the echo of our footsteps the only sound. My chest felt tight, my emotions swirling between rage, sadness, and an odd sense of relief. Emily's final words, her unapologetic confession that she had never loved either of us, played over and over in my mind like a broken record. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but there was also clarity. The woman I thought I loved, the one I had built my life around, had been a stranger all along. We stepped into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, Jason let out a shaky breath. "Well, that was something," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. His attempt at levity fell flat, the weight of the confrontation still hanging heavy in the air. I glanced at him, my jaw tightening. "She didn't even try to deny it," I said, my voice low. "She didn't care. Not about me. Not about you. Not about anything." Jason nodded grimly. "She's a master manipulator, Tyler. She's been playing this game for so long. I don't think she even knows how to be genuine anymore." The elevator dinged, and we stepped out into the lobby. The cool air outside hit me like a slap, a harsh reminder that the world kept moving, even as mine had been turned upside down. Jason pulled out his phone and began scrolling through messages, likely texting his lawyer or the private investigator. I stood beside him, staring at the night sky, wondering where I was supposed to go from here. "Hey," Jason said after a moment, breaking the silence. "We've got everything we need to move forward. The PI will file the evidence with the lawyer, and we'll get the ball rolling. But what about you? What's your next move?" I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "I don't even know, man. I thought exposing her would make me feel better, but now," I trailed off, struggling to put my emotions into words. "Now it just feels empty. Like, what was the point of all of this?" Jason put a hand on my shoulder, his expression surprisingly sympathetic. "The point is, you stood up for yourself. You didn't let her walk all over you. That's not nothing." I nodded, but his words did little to ease the knot in my chest. "I guess. But what happens now?" I go home to an empty house, sort through the mess she left behind, and try to figure out how to start over. "That's part of it," Jason said. "But it's not all bad. You've got a clean slate now, Tyler. You can rebuild, find someone who actually deserves you. Someone who doesn't treat you like an ATM or a backup plan." The thought of starting over felt overwhelming, but Jason's words struck a chord. For the first time in months, I wasn't tied down by Emily's lies and deceit. I was free, in a way I hadn't been in years. It was a terrifying realization, but also a liberating one. As Jason and I parted ways, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie with him. We were two men who had been burned by the same woman, united by our shared experience of betrayal. It wasn't the kind of bond one ever expected to form, but it was something. When I got home, the house felt eerily quiet. Emily's absence was palpable, her perfume still lingering faintly in the air. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where she had sat just days ago, laughing at a movie like everything was fine. The weight of it all came crashing down, and for the first time, I let myself feel the full impact of what had happened. I was angry, angrier than I'd ever been, at Emily for her lies and manipulation, at Jason for being complicit in the affair, but mostly at myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for letting her take advantage of me, for believing in her when I should have trusted my instincts. But beneath the anger was a deep sadness. I had loved her, truly, deeply loved her, and she had torn that love apart without a second thought. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the loss of the life I thought we were building together, the future I thought we had. I sat there for hours, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind. The good times, the bad, the moments that now seemed so obvious in hindsight. And then, as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Emily define me. I wasn't going to let her betrayal be the thing that broke me. Yes, she had taken a lot from me, money, trust, love, but she hadn't taken everything. I still had my dignity, my strength, my ability to rebuild. Over the next few days, I started taking steps to move forward. I contacted a lawyer to start the divorce process and ensure that Emily wouldn't get another penny from me. I blocked her number, deleted her photos, and began clearing her things out of the house. Each action felt like shedding a layer of pain, like reclaiming a part of myself that she had stolen. Jason kept me updated on the legal side of things, and together, we worked to ensure that Emily's actions wouldn't go unpunished. The process was long and exhausting, but it gave me a sense of purpose, a way to channel my anger into something productive. In the weeks that followed, I started to feel lighter. The weight of Emily's lies began to lift, replaced by a sense of clarity and determination. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into work, and started focusing on myself for the first time in years. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I realized something. Emily's betrayal had been devastating, yes, but it had also been a wake-up call, a reminder that I deserve better, that I deserve happiness, honesty, and love. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a flicker of hope for the future. A future that, for the first time in a long time, felt entirely my own.